Hey, good afternoon. My name is Samuel MacArthur. Um, my presentation that I chose to do is the argument that Japan's film industry created the rise of a more feminist approach to film, particularly with the rise of female antagonists, and basically how this helps create a societal change to traditional thought processes within Japanese culture itself, um, and particularly looking at some of Kurosawa and Kenji Mizoguchi's works with the films that we've discussed in class, being the Osaka Clergy as well as Ramashan. I really would just like to dig in deeper to these, so I'm just going to set this up here so we can talk about that. First, a little backstory on Mr. Kurosawa's life leading up to this film masterpiece that is domed, I believe it was in 1956, is one of the greatest films in the history of the industry. And kind of just some of their thought processes when it came to theater, as well as their directing styles and what influenced them. So, March 23rd, 1910, he was born in Japan, obviously. His family comes from a history of samurai, and finances for him and his family were never particularly an issue. They were a pretty wealthy family. Education for Mr. Kurosawa also came pretty easy as well. It wasn't until failure to get in one of the most prominent high school programs in his country that education became an issue, and he decided to spend some more time away from his family. His brother, Huligo, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, they continued to stay pretty close. They went and viewed some of the wreckage from a natural disaster that happened in Japan, and a lot of people believe that is where his influence came for his passion for literature, storytelling, motivating him to become a Benshi himself. His brother later committed suicide, and that also continued to motivate him. And continued to motivate him to just kind of, I guess the right term for this is to get into that hurt, to present his key to success, which is to give audiences unpleasant truths to portray a story, while also exposing Japan's, as well as international, issues at the time. The Rashomon effect was named after his film. Now, just a brief summary of exactly what does happen in Rashomon. You have plenty of different perspectives here. You have a bandit, you have a commoner, you have a priest, a samurai that gives his depiction in through a medium. You have a bunch of different working pieces here, and what Kurosawa does, creating one of the best films, arguably his best film, is a deceptive form of storytelling. While all characters have different opinions of what an event happens, it draws them all together. Let me rephrase that. All characters share a different opinion of the event that draws them all together in the first place. This entire process of what happens in this story is all because of the wife. And now I know what you're thinking. It takes two people to create one of these scenarios, whether it was an affair or it was truly rape, whatever the case may be. The female becomes, whether or not that's even what his intentions were, was, in my personal opinion, the antagonist in the story. She was the one who was trying to get away with more, to try and get the best out of the situation. She wanted out of the situation. The story ultimately winds up being a journey of heartbreak, shock, and acceptance at the end, with the priest feeling like his faith in humanity is restored. Another societal issue during this time, with a lot of changing traditions in Japanese culture. Now, I'll go into more detail with this later on, but now I want to move on to Kenji Mizoguchi's life leading up to Osaka Elegy. Born May 16th, 1898, and dying in August 24th, 1956. Mizoguchi grew up in a middle-class family, but after the start of the war, his father decides to switch up the business and causes a ton of financial issues with his family, causing more aggressive parenting styles. Some argue very abusive. I argue abusive as well. His main influence being Sozu or Suzuku, depending on what historical document you want to read, what kind of research you want to dig up on with some of these directors. He eventually sold her into prostitution, relocating the family near a brothel. And his sister, after the mother passes away, brings in Mizoguchi into her personal home to help educate him. And due to this kind act, he falls in love with an art program in an art school located in Japan. It took less than a year, just a little over a year maybe, if I can remember my math correctly on that, to become an actor. Full-fledged director by 1923. Now, Mizoguchi, the reason I picked these two in particular, Mizoguchi is more of a realistic director. What I mean by that is it's a realistic approach to life in Japan during the modernization of the country. A lot of his stories, particularly this story, were able to help a lot of people see some changes that needed to happen with his own country, and that Japan was ready to abandon some of those traditional practices that honestly gave Mizoguchi a lot of trouble in his life. Now, these film styles, their approach to how they direct and things of that nature, more particular for these two instances, with these two stories that I've loved this semester. Calling it his first serious film, it's a lot of sick humor if you have a good sense of humor, but also a lot of serious consequences. And if I were her, I would probably be smoking a filtered cigarette myself. Another example of a female antagonist. She tries to help herself and family out of issues. But again, another thing that links them together is the deceitful intent of what she does to try and get her way in this story. Now, it's not deceitful maybe in the same sense as the wife in Rashomon. But in this instance, she too does what she can to deceive her way to help her family. Aoko is her name, and she's left alone with no home or family to call her own after dishonoring them by the end of the story. This is also one of the first international recognized films for Japan. And this is where I really kind of just wanted to break down a lot of my arguments using some of those stories, some of the authors, comparing them. Post-World War I Japan was going through a lot of different changes. There was a lot of modernization. A lot of traditional lifestyles were changing, were being challenged at home. a lot of women that you can see, particularly in the last instance from Mizoguchi's the Osaka Elegy. A lot of traditional attire was still being forced to be worn at home, but in the workplace they're able to wear more of, I guess, a New York or Los Angeles style clothing. But it also broke down a lot of societal issues that they had going on during the time. There were a lot of anti-female, a lot of womanizing the higher in position men were. There was a lot of brothels in major cities. From the first story, you see the potential of rape. People just roaming the country, raping, and if you look at history, there's arguments. There was something held at UNG a couple years ago of someone studying Japanese history and things of that nature, of whether or not a lot of these people were just raped and used for their bodies. So what these two directors did, in my opinion, is enable a voice for women, as well as just show how smart women could be of taking advantage in such times. It's not just the men that are smart here, the women are too. And Rashomon, the wife, which perspective is actually true? I think we can all agree it's still very confusing no matter how many times you read about it or watch it. She's able to get out of the position by empowering the pride of both her husband and a bandit to create a scene she's able to escape. Though it's probably corrupt, it gave the woman power in film. That's something in and of itself traditional Japanese ideology would not have allowed. The female was to obey the orders of her father in these traditional mindsets, or her husband, but in a new approach to film, we see the female trying to take advantage of a situation. It's allowing women to see that they're able to not only have large roles in film, they're also capable of being equals with males in their life. And in the last film, it involves a female lead the whole time. Even though our female antagonist is defying the odds of her culture, traditional practices that are still in place prevent anyone from seeing that she was truly trying to honor her family, losing the love of her life, choosing to sleep with a superior at work, whatever the case may be. The customs of her time made her lose everything. There was no second chance. The directing style that Mizoguchi took, not just from his past, drawing from maybe his sister being in a brothel, which was the stereotypical reaction to a Japanese family's decision-making process during this time. But it allowed for a new conversation in the world, how they treat women, sacrifice women's make daily, just how powerful a female truly can be, and how she can take a lead in the film industry. As Ayoko at the end, being left alone with no one, everyone should feel heartbroken for a woman who just lost everything trying to save it. Both of these men enabled the conversation, empowered women worldwide, and showed the power that women have in this world, whether it's corrupt, witty, hardworking, loyal to family, or many more. These men tried to tell a story, and in doing so provided proof to all societies that women are just as capable of acting, providing for family, as well as tearing them down too. Thank you to the wife in the first film that I discussed. They challenged their own traditional beliefs at home and pushed for faith in people, as well as growth of society. If society can be exposed to their ways, change can happen, people can learn and adapt, women slowly start seeing bigger roles in film after some of these films come out, especially from Japanese cinema, and women become more respected in society. That's basically what I have here. Thank you for your time, and God bless you.